Sean Hannity would have you believe that he's not pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine. After all, he can't be because he's not a doctor. It's not his place to give you any advice, to tip the scales in either direction, to indicate what you should or shouldn't do. He is being oddly humble for Sean Hannity when it comes to the vaccine, which I have to assume is that's a real position, that's a value of his, rooted in his desire to not give you bad advice. But is it? Is he always so humble about tipping the scales on your opinion on a piece of medicine? Well, it turns out not. In fact, not even during this pandemic. And he is hardly alone on the right. They may say it's not their place to get involved, but last year, when hydroxychloroquine was in the news, they weren't quite so humble, even if sometimes Sean Hannity did use the same excuse to some extent. So last year, while reminding viewers that he wasn't a doctor, he routinely asked guests whether they would take hydroxychloroquine for treatment if they were infected with COVID, which we've since learned is a violation of your HIPAA rights. But anyway, his defense against not having to say whether he's vaccinated is, how dare you ask me if I would do that? But he was asking everyone who came on his show if they would take hydroxychloroquine. Now that's just a question, you might say. That's not advocacy, and yet he often highlighted the use of the drug, at one point citing a study that he told viewers showed, quote, hydroxychloroquine is rated now the most effective therapy by doctors. Over 6,300 of them surveyed for coronavirus. Okay, so that's not him saying anything, that's just him saying the doctors support it. Okay, well, the doctors support vaccination. Outside of a couple of kooks on Newsmax, doctors all over the country are vaccinating people. So if thousands of them supporting of a medicine was good enough for hydroxychloroquine, why does millions of them supporting the vaccine not lead to him being willing to support it? But all of this might still allow him to kind of weasel out and say he's not getting directly involved and have a little bit of that humility. But he also at one point suggested that the entire leadership of the FDA should be fired because they weren't recommending hydroxychloroquine. So he's saying my evaluation as a pundit of what you doctors should be advising is enough that I'm willing to have you be fired because you disagree with my medical evaluation. When it's hydroxychloroquine, when it's vaccination, he's much more humble. Now really fast, he's not alone in this. Laura Ingraham called the drug a game changer, talking about people's miracle turnaround. She said anyone who questioned the drug's efficacy was in total denial. How dare you imply that this isn't an amazing cure for the whole thing, even though it turned out not to be. So she said, I love everybody, love the medical profession, but they want a double-blind controlled study on whether the sky is blue. So they wanted data on hydroxychloroquine, and she implied that they were being ridiculous and wasting time. But on the vaccine, can we ever really know? We need a couple years to look into the side effects. Weird how that turns out. Anyway, look, we can jump ahead. Sebastian Gorka was saying, I'm sure Trump's taking his hydroxy this morning, just like I did. Hydroxy, Z-Pack, and zinc equals MAGA. So he was very confident about the medicine he was taking then when it wasn't a vaccine. On Steve Bannon's podcast, he suggested that one of the first things Trump should do when he got sick was to get up on the hydroxy right away. They'd never say you should get vaccinated, but when it was hydroxychloroquine, there was no caution, there was no humility. They might as well be doctors. Anyway, Kenya, any thoughts on that?
I think what we're seeing here, and I'm down to call a spade, is the obvious attempt to dial back from the obvious legal culpability that this presents. The same way, I think we all know of the incidents from the 1980s, early 90s, where there was a restaurant chain that was sued because of the temperature of their coffee. As frivolous as many people thought that this lawsuit was, and as much as the elder woman who brought this lawsuit against the restaurant chain, it created substantial conversations about what can be legally hot and what can be how a restaurant can be culpable to the damages of their consumers, even when the action or the ignorance of that action is their own. And how much culpability does any one organization, person, or entity hold for the consequences when somebody takes that and then does something else with it? And so what Fox News and what their pundits and what everyone else who was peddling hydroxychloroquine or saying that essentially they were taking it or peddling it as a possible cure-all for a deadly virus that we knew at the time to not be effective. They're now trying to dial back from what could be a legal jeopardy that they find themselves in when there are those who have taken it, who are those who consume their advice, consume their punditry, and believe them to be media experts who have an unbiased, scientifically sound analysis of what this medicine does or what this medicine is purported to do. And those who may have foolishly, like similarly, there may be those who actually try to cure their coronavirus with bleach as the president told them to, or alluded it's possible, or even just suggested. Knowing that those ignorant statements were made out there, they find themselves, regardless of whether they personally attested to it or to directly encourage those to do so, they find themselves in potential trouble later on when there's dire consequences or a trend, a pattern of consequences that others may legally pursue them for. And so we're seeing those efforts to dial back the rhetoric now when it's a little too late. We have an established record here of you encouraging people to take these steps that had no basis in scientific fact. And now you want to use that very ignorance to medicine to absolve yourself when it's just not going to work here.
Charles, quick final thought.
I tend to agree with everything Kenya said. I mean, I think the one caveat to everything that we're talking about is at the end of the day, it says less about them and more about us. When I say us, I'm talking about the American public as a whole, and the fact that we are unfortunately in a space where we are easily manipulated by misinformation. And a lot of it comes because we refuse to think critically about these things. And in some cases may not have ever learned to think critically about some things. And I mean, I can't say it's about not reading between the lines, because if you're reading between the lines, the between is really, really big. And it's hard to miss if you're looking for it. But unfortunately, we've been conditioned not to, and this is the result.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.